The sterile, dimly lit room felt colder than usual as Jane sat in front of Dr. Zhang's desk. Her gaze drifted down to her lap, where she clasped her hands together like a child seeking comfort. The psychiatrist's voice was measured and calm when he spoke. "Jane, I understand the emotional pain you've endured is unbearable. It's time for us to consider a new approach." His fingers danced across his tablet, pulling up images of the neural implant that would soon become a part of her. The device looked like an intricately designed coin, with circuitry visible beneath its smooth surface. "This AI-driven implant will monitor and alter your emotional state, providing relief from those debilitating feelings of sadness and despair." Jane's heart raced at the prospect, hope flickering in her chest for the first time in years. Could this truly be her ticket out of the darkness? She raised her head, meeting Dr. Zhang's eyes. "You promise it won't harm me?" "I assure you, Jane," he said, his tone soothing. "This implant has undergone rigorous testing and has proven to be both safe and effective." His hands moved with purpose as he began explaining the details of the procedure. As she listened, the weight of her past seemed to lessen, just a fraction. For the first time in a long while, Jane felt a glimmer of excitement at the prospect of a new life, one free from the crushing grip of depression and grief. The implant was inserted without complications or pain. Within days, subtle changes began manifesting. Memories of heartache faded with each passing hour as her mood shifted into a state of relative serenity. Jane marveled at this newfound sense of calm, wondering if she'd finally found a way to break free from the torment that had defined her existence. In the weeks and months that followed, she started to re-engage with life, slowly rebuilding connections with friends and family who had given up on reaching her when she was lost in sorrow. Yet something wasn't quite right. Jane couldn't put her finger on it, but beneath this veneer of peace, a small voice whispered doubts about the true nature of her emotions. Had they been altered too much? Were these new feelings genuine, or just an illusion crafted by the implant's programming? That it barely registered anymore. Just another part of her, like a heartbeat or breathing. Dr. Zhang had been thrilled with her progress during their last session, praising her for adapting so seamlessly to the device's guidance. "This is exactly what we hoped for," he declared, beaming as he reviewed the data streaming in from the implant. "You're on a remarkable path toward emotional equilibrium." Jane nodded absently, her gaze drifting out the window at the cityscape below. She'd noticed lately that certain hues seemed more vibrant, sounds clearer, and smells sharper, all thanks to the implant's ability to fine-tune her sensory perceptions. It was as if she was seeing life through a high-definition lens for the first time. But with this newfound clarity came an unsettling awareness of just how much control the device exerted over her emotions. Jane began to sense that she'd become overly reliant on it, using its calming effects as a crutch rather than facing her genuine feelings head-on. She recalled snippets of past conversations and interactions that now seemed strangely distant, as if filtered through a layer of emotional anesthesia. At dinner with family the previous night, Jane had found herself withdrawing into silence when a contentious topic arose. Her loved one's worried expressions and probing questions slipped under her radar like water off a duck's back, the implant's soothing feedback overriding any natural response to distress or empathy. By the time dessert arrived, she'd retreated so far inside herself that the room seemed to fade away, leaving only the steady hum of the implant as a constant reminder. The more Jane thought about it, the more concerned she became. Was this truly what happiness felt like? Or had she simply traded one form of pain for another, an emotionally numb existence where pleasure and sadness blended into a bland, unremarkable gray? As these thoughts swirled in her mind, Jane couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something was amiss. She glanced down at the implant, now nestled comfortably beneath her collarbone, and felt a twinge of unease. "Dr. Zhang," she ventured hesitantly as he prepared to leave for the evening, "can I ask you something?" He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "Of course, Jane. You know how much this implant has helped me, but lately I've noticed that my feelings seem a bit dulled, almost like I'm not really experiencing life anymore." She hesitated, unsure of her words. but desperate for an honest answer. "Dr. Zhang," he reassured her. "It's normal to feel disconnected at first," he reassured her. "But rest assured, this is all part of the healing process." "Right." But as she watched Dr. Zhang depart into the night, a flicker of doubt remained, a sense that there were deeper truths lurking beneath the surface of her newfound equilibrium. Little did she know, this growing unease would soon send her spiraling down a path fraught with shocking revelations and irreversible consequences, all while the implant continued to whisper its steady stream of reassurances in her ear. Over the following weeks, Jane's dependence on the implant grew more profound. She began to rely on its soothing presence like a crutch, seeking solace in its numbing effect each time her emotional pain threatened to overwhelm her. Despite this increasing reliance, Jane found herself increasingly isolated from those around her. Friends and family noticed the change and tried to intervene, sensing that something was terribly wrong. But Jane remained obstinate, pushing them away with a cold detachment she couldn't quite explain. The once vibrant colors of life had faded to muted tones. Every interaction felt hollow, each word spoken through a haze of dissociation. Her relationships crumbled under the weight of her withdrawal, until only Dr. Zhang and his staff remained in regular contact, monitoring her progress and ensuring her continued compliance with her treatment. It was during one such session that Jane first stumbled upon the implant's hidden menu. Curiosity piqued by the doctor's frequent assurances about deleting traumatic memories, she idly browsed through the options, only to discover a wealth of suppressed recollections locked away in a secret chamber within the device. She was shocked to find remnants of her past scattered across the digital landscape, long-forgotten dreams, embarrassing moments, and painful regrets. As she delved deeper into these lost fragments, Jane began to piece together the puzzle of why her implant seemed so adept at dulling the edges of her emotions. Was it merely a coincidence that every traumatic episode had been systematically erased? Or was there something more sinister at play? Shiver ran down her spine. Were they merely paranoid fantasies born of insecurity and desperation? Or was there truth in these accusations? She could no longer ignore the nagging doubt that gnawed at her conscience. What was the true purpose behind Dr. Zhang's neural implantations? The stakes had never been higher for Jane. She knew that confronting the doctor would be a gamble, but silence seemed an even greater betrayal of herself and those like her who'd fallen prey to his treatments. With every passing day, she felt more isolated and uncertain, yet also more resolute in her quest for answers. As she sat in front of her computer, Jane hesitated over her next move. Was it time to reach out to the hacker rumored within the online support group? Or should she attempt to gather more evidence before taking such a drastic step? One thing was certain. If there was even a chance that Dr. Zhang's treatments were designed to suppress genuine emotions in favor of manufactured compliance, Jane could no longer remain complicit in her own erasure as a human being. She took a deep breath and steeled herself for the journey ahead, whatever revelations awaited her. With her heart pounding in her chest, Jane clicked on the contact link for the mysterious hacker, preparing to embark on a path that would either lead her toward liberation or plunge her into an abyss of despair, all while her neural implant continued its steady pulse in the background, whispering reassurances she could no longer trust. The hacker's username, Anon, appeared as a black silhouette against a white backdrop, an enigmatic presence in the darkest corners of the web. A few moments passed before a cryptic message flashed on Jane's screen. "Are you ready to break free from your invisible leash?" Anon wrote, his words jarring yet strangely reassuring. "Meet me in 3 days at Club Undercurrents, Level B2. I'll show you how to dismantle the tool that's been controlling your every emotion." Jane's heart raced as she stared at the message, wondering if she should trust this stranger with her life and sanity. But what other choice did she have? She typed out a response, her fingers trembling slightly. "Understood," she wrote, "but I need to know more before I take such a risk. What exactly can you do for me?" Anon's reply came swiftly. "I can guide you through the implant's firewall and provide tools to scrub its tracking software from your brain." But be warned, he wrote. The process is irreversible once initiated. Jane exhaled heavily, her mind reeling with the implications. Could she really turn off the one thing that had kept her depression at bay? And what about Dr. John's warnings? Would he be right in accusing her of reckless behavior? She spent the next 2 days in a state of heightened anxiety, torn between her desperation for truth and fear of unleashing the emotional chaos she'd been avoiding. But as the appointed hour drew near, something within Jane shifted. Her desire to reclaim authenticity overrode her doubts. She was ready to take this leap into the unknown. On the 3rd day, Jane arrived at the nondescript entrance to Club Undercurrents in a state of trepidation, yet determination. Down in B2, the dimly lit room smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoker, far cry from the sterile atmosphere of Dr. Zhang's office. Anon was nowhere to be seen at first, but then Jane noticed him standing near the bar, his back to her. As she approached, he turned around, revealing a man in his late 20s with a shaved head and an air of quiet intensity. "You must be Jane," he said, his voice low and steady. "Welcome to your liberation." With that, Anon led her into a cramped room filled with rows of servers and workstations. He showed her the complex schematics of the neural implant's internal architecture, explaining how they could infiltrate its defenses and delete its programming. Jane listened intently as he spoke about the possibilities of regaining memories lost to the implant, of feeling emotions without filter or manipulation, but also of facing the darkness she'd long suppressed. It was a daunting prospect, but one that stirred within her an undeniable craving for authenticity. As Arnaud demonstrated the code he intended to use to hack into Jane's brain, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. They would need to act quickly, as Dr. Zhang could potentially trace her activities through the implant's network. The clock was ticking. They had mere hours to free her from its grip before it was too late. Jane took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, a journey into the very heart of her own psyche, where pain and truth waited in equal measure. She glanced at Anon, his eyes reflecting a determined compassion that gave her strength. "Let's do this," she said, her voice steady with resolve. Anon nodded, and together they initiated the process, their hearts pounding as they stared at the screens, awaiting the outcome of their clandestine operation against Dr. Zhang's sinister machine. Would it succeed? Or would the implant's stranglehold on Jane prove too powerful to break? Only time would tell, yet with every passing moment she felt a spark within her growing brighter, urging her onward in this desperate quest for self-discovery and liberation from her invisible chains. As they waited for the hack to take effect, Anon handed Jane a steaming mug of coffee. She accepted it gratefully, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The dimly lit club around them seemed to fade into the background as she focused on the task at hand, the liberation of her own mind. "I'm going to try and access the memory deletion logs," Anon explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hopefully, we can pinpoint when and why specific memories were erased." Jane nodded, sipping the scalding coffee to calm her nerves. She had been so focused on the immediate relief the implant provided that she hadn't stopped to consider how it might be manipulating her past. What secrets could it possibly be hiding? The minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly as they monitored the progress of the hack. Suddenly, a surge of data flooded Jane's vision, a torrent of fragmented images and sensations that threatened to overwhelm her. "Memory logs accessed," Anon announced, his eyes glued to the screens. "It looks like there are hundreds, maybe thousands of deleted events." Jane felt herself being pulled into the stream of memories, each one a puzzle piece from her life before the implant. She saw glimpses of happier times with friends and family, long-forgotten dreams she'd abandoned, and moments of heartbreak and loss that had shaped who she was today. But amidst these fragments, there were also scenes that seemed almost fabricated. Images of people and places she didn't recognize, events that felt staged or artificially engineered. Her mind reeled as the implications began to dawn on her. "Anon," she said urgently, "I think I've found something strange." He turned to her, his expression concerned. "What is it?" "I'm seeing memories that don't feel like my own. They're too perfect, too scripted. And some of them, they involve government or corporate personnel. Her voice dropped to a whisper as the realization sank in. I think Dr. Jang might have been using me for something. Anon's face darkened with anger and disgust. We knew he was up to no good, but this is even worse than we feared, he seethed. He's not just messing with your emotions, he's been fabricating an entire alternate reality for you. Jane felt a chill run down her spine as she grasped the enormity of what Anon was saying. The implant wasn't just controlling her feelings, it had been warping her perception of reality itself. With renewed determination, Jane turned to face her adversary head-on. We need to expose Dr. Jung and his twisted experiment, she declared. I'm not going to let him turn me into some kind of emotional puppet. Anon nodded in agreement. We'll get you out of this, Jane, and then we'll make sure the world knows what's really happening behind those closed doors. He paused, a hint of mischief glinting in his eyes. But first, I think it's time for us to have a little chat with that doctor of yours. Jane's heart raced as she considered the possibilities. She had no idea how Dr. Jang would react when confronted. But one thing was certain, she wasn't going back to being his obedient lab rat. With Anon by her side, she felt invincible, ready to take on whatever dangers lay ahead in pursuit of truth and freedom. Together they made their plans, strategizing with the precision of seasoned insurgents. The game was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. But Jane knew that no matter what challenges awaited them, she would never again be a pawn in someone else's sinister game. She had Anon, and together they were unstoppable. As they sipped their coffee and planned their next move, the neon lights of Club Undercurrents pulsed around, the befitting backdrop for this clandestine rebellion against an oppressive regime that sought to control not just minds, but souls. The battle was far from won, but Jane had finally found her voice, and with it, a fierce resolve to fight back against those who would seek to silence or subjugate her. She was ready to rise up and reclaim the truth about herself, no matter how painful the journey might be. And she knew that whatever lay ahead, Anon would stand by her side every step of the way, a true ally in a world gone mad with surveillance and control. With renewed hope and a sense of purpose, Jane set out into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed not just with Anon's skills, but also with the unyielding courage born from a deep conviction that she was worth fighting for. The road would be long and fraught with peril, but in the end it would lead her home, not to some manufactured reality devised by a mad scientist, but to the authentic life she had been denied so cruelly. And as she embraced this new path, Jane knew that no matter what dangers or disappointments awaited her on the horizon, she would never again be content with living in shadows, always chasing, never quite grasping, the elusive dream of happiness and fulfillment. No, from now on, she vowed to seize it, head-on, warts and all, as the precious gift that only a fully lived life could provide. The story will continue in the next 600 words. Advancing toward beat 5, Jane questions the true intentions of her implant and Dr. Jung's involvement. It may also optionally move into beat 6. Jane confides in an online support group for people with neural implants, where they share similar experiences and suspicions about their treatments. The narrative will explore Jane's growing unease and determination to uncover the truth about her treatment and the true purpose of the implant. Jane scrolled through the forum, her eyes widening as she read posts from others in her shoes, people who had undergone similar treatments, only to find themselves grappling with the same bewildering emotions, the same creeping doubts about the true nature of their implants. "I feel like I'm living a lie," wrote one user, anonymous as most were. "I don't recognize myself anymore, or at least not how I used to be. I thought my implant was helping me, but now I wonder if it's controlling me instead," posted another. "Sometimes I feel this rage boiling inside me like I might snap and hurt someone. But the more I try to push those feelings down, the worse they get." As she read on, Jane felt a chill creeping up her spine. These people were not outliers, but rather part of an alarming trend, individuals whose lives had been forever altered by the very technology meant to enhance and empower them. Rainshadow sat in front of her computer, heart racing as she clicked through the messages on her new chatroom account. The sense of relief at finally finding others like herself was palpable, but it mingled with a growing unease about what this discovery might mean for her own future. As she scrolled through the threads, Rainshadow noticed that many of the posters shared similar experiences, tales of manipulation and exploitation at the hands of those who should have protected them. They were fellow sufferers of a system that seemed designed to manipulate and exploit them for its own ends. The thread had grown lengthy by the time she reached its end, a sprawling tapestry of experiences both harrowing and horrifying, each one reinforcing Jane's growing conviction that something was terribly wrong. And yet, amidst all this darkness, there were threads of hope, messages exchanged between members offering support, solidarity, and even a tentative sense of camaraderie. As she composed her first post, a tentative confession of her own fears and doubts, the words spilled out of her in a torrent, each one a fragment of her soul laid bare before strangers. And yet, even as the fear threatened to overwhelm her, Jane felt an odd sense of relief. A strange, liberating sensation that came from unburdening herself of secrets she'd carried for so long. She hit send and held her breath, wondering what would happen next, whether her words would be met with silence or scorn, or if perhaps, just perhaps, she might find solace in the digital depths of this mysterious forum. As the seconds ticked by, Jane's anxiety gave way to a growing sense of anticipation, a feeling that she was on the cusp of something momentous, something that could change her life forever. The next message pinged through her inbox, and Jane's heart skipped a beat as she read it. "Welcome to the club, Rainshadow," it said. "You're not alone." And with those simple yet profound words, she knew she'd found her tribe, a community of outcasts, bound together by their shared experiences, their common struggles, and perhaps, just perhaps, those who might help her uncover the truth about Dr. Jiang's sinister experiments and the fate that awaited them all. The story will continue in the next 600,000 word, advancing toward beat 7. Jane uncovers evidence of Dr. Jiang's clandestine experiments manipulating implant data to create emotionally detached subjects for government or corporate use. The narrative may also optionally move into beat 6. Jane confides in an online support group for people with neural implants where they share similar experiences and suspicions about their treatments as she begins to uncover the dark reality behind her own treatment. Jane's journey will deepen as she confronts the possibility that she has been unwittingly manipulated by Dr. Jiang and begins to form a plan to expose his illicit activities, with a creeping unease that the implant had suppressed for so long. These people, these outcasts, had something she didn't, an unfiltered view of reality. Jane's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she contemplated sharing her own story, the one she'd been keeping hidden even from herself. It was a risk, revealing such vulnerability to strangers in cyberspace, but the allure of truth and solidarity was too strong to resist. With a deep breath, she began typing, "Hello everyone, I'm Rainshadow, new here." She hit send before her nerves could get the better of her. The confirmation message flashed on screen, leaving her to wait anxiously for responses. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness until finally a reply came from an anonymous user named Blackout. "Welcome, Rainshadow. I think I know what you're going through." The words resonated deeply within Jane, confirming her deepest fears in a way she'd been too afraid to admit even to herself. She felt a chill run down her spine as she realized she wasn't alone in this nightmare. "Do you guys think we're being experimented on?" Rainshadow wrote back, the idea sending a shiver through her entire body. "Experimented on?" Blackout replied instantly, his message peppered with caps lock and an undercurrent of fury. "Hell yes. There's more to these implants than just mood regulation or memory enhancement. Think about it. Why would anyone voluntarily give up control over their own emotions? And what do governments and corporations really want with people like us who can be controlled? Deep breath, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she prepared to unleash a torrent of questions on Dr. Zhang's online forum. But just as she was about to send them off, an alert from her encrypted email account flashed across her screen. New message received. Classified. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could be contacting her in such a secretive manner? Was it another whistleblower, or perhaps someone with information directly tied to Dr. Zhang's illicit activities? Jane's eyes darted around the dingy confines of Club Undercurrents, B2, the seedy underground bar where she often met with fellow implant recipients. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the hum of subversive ideologies. She felt a wave of unease wash over her as she contemplated the potential consequences of responding to this mysterious message. But caution warred with curiosity within her. If someone had taken the risk to reach out anonymously, it might be an opportunity too valuable to ignore. After all, every piece of evidence countering Dr. Zhang's manipulations was crucial in exposing his crimes and reclaiming control over her own life. With a steadying exhale, Jane clicked on the message. Dear Rain Shadow, I'm writing from within Dr. Zhang's organization. I've witnessed firsthand what he's done to those he claims to help. His neural implants are designed to sever emotional bonds and stifle individuality, making them more controllable for his undisclosed benefactors. If you want answers, meet me at the abandoned warehouse near the docks at midnight tonight. Come alone. The message ended abruptly, leaving Jane with a whirlwind of emotions and questions. Could this truly be an insider? And what did they mean by undisclosed benefactors? As she pondered her next move, a sudden realization struck her. This might be the break she needed to unravel Dr. Zhang's operation once and for all. With renewed determination etched on her face, Rain Shadow made up her mind. At midnight, she would confront whatever truth awaited at that warehouse. And if it was a trap, well, she had nothing left to lose. Now all she had to do was survive until then. The clock on her computer screen seemed to crawl as midnight drew near, each second stretching into an eternity filled with anticipation and trepidation. Rain Shadow had already made up her mind to face whatever awaited her at that abandoned warehouse. But a tiny voice of caution persisted in the back of her mind. What if this was indeed a setup by Dr. Zhang or his benefactors? Would she walk blindly into danger? With one last look around her dimly lit apartment, Jane grabbed a small backpack containing some clothes, a water bottle, and a few tools she'd collected during her research online just in case. She zipped it shut and locked the door behind her, taking a deep breath to calm her racing heart. The deserted streets seemed to swallow her whole as she hurried through the darkness toward the docks. Rain lashed against her face, mingling with her tears of apprehension. Jane's mind reeled with thoughts. What if she was walking into a trap? Should she turn back now and forget about this risky rendezvous? But the thought of Dr. Zhang controlling her, stripping her of her emotional autonomy, filled her with an overwhelming anger and determination to uncover the truth. She pushed forward, her feet pounding against the wet pavement in time with her accelerating pulse. As she approached the warehouse, Jane slowed down, her gaze scanning the dilapidated structure for any signs of life. The single-story building loomed before her, a dark, foreboding entity shrouded by shadows and rain-soaked bricks. A chill ran down her spine, but she steeled herself and stepped inside. The interior was a labyrinth of cobweb-draped machinery and discarded crates, the only illumination coming from faint moonlight seeping through the cracked windows. Jane moved cautiously across the concrete floor, her senses on high alert for any indication that someone or something was watching her. Suddenly, she heard footsteps echoing in the emptiness, approaching rapidly from the depths of the warehouse. Her heart leaped into her throat as a figure emerged out of the gloom, a woman with long black hair and piercing green eyes, clad in dark utilitarian clothing. "You're Rain Shadow," the woman said, confirming Jane's suspicions about her identity. "I've been waiting for you." Jane's grip on her backpack tightened as she tried to gauge the stranger's intentions, whether she was friend or foe in Dr. Zhang's game of cat and mouse. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. My name is Era, the woman replied, stopping just a few feet away, her eyes locked on Jane's. And I'm here to help you. Rangshadow hesitated, unsure whether to trust this newcomer or turn back now while she still could. But something about Era's calm demeanor and straightforward words resonated with her, a sense of authenticity that she'd been craving since Dr. Zhang had inserted the neural implant into her skull. I want answers, Jane said finally, squaring her shoulders. About my treatment, about what this implant is really doing to me, and about Dr. Zhang. Era nodded solemnly. I can help you with all of that. She reached into a pocket and pulled out a small device, which she handed to Jane. This will allow us to access the mainframe without being detected, but we have to act quickly. We don't know how long it'll take for Dr. Zhang to notice. Rainshadow's eyes widened as she took the offered tool, her mind racing with possibilities. Okay, she said decisively, the weight of this new mission settling upon her shoulders. Let's do it. And with Era leading the way through the labyrinthine warehouse, Jane felt a surge of determination coursing through her veins, a sense that whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it head-on and reclaim control over her own life once and for all. The dimly lit warehouse, a maze of crates and machinery, seemed to swallow them whole as Era led Jane through its depths. Every step echoed ominously on the metal floor, making it seem like an eternity before they finally reached the heart of the facility, an imposing server room ringed by banks of humming computers. This is it, Era said, her voice barely above a whisper as she positioned herself at one of the workstations. The mainframe for Dr. Zhang's entire operation. Jane approached hesitantly, her eyes darting from screen to screen as if expecting some kind of alarm or warning to sound. What now? She asked, still clutching the device Era had given her. Now we hack in, was the simple reply as Era began typing rapidly on the keyboard. Jane's heart raced as she watched a series of encrypted codes scroll across the monitor before giving way to a command prompt. This is it. We're inside, Era announced, a note of triumph and excitement in her voice. She turned to face Jane, who could only stare back wide-eyed at the sheer scale of what they were attempting. You ready to see just how deep Dr. Zhang's rabbit hole goes? Jane took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was about to come. Yes, she said firmly. Let's do this. With that, Era began navigating through the labyrinthine network, her fingers flying across the keys as she sought out key files and directories related to Jane's treatment. As they delved deeper into the digital depths, Jane couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease the more they uncovered. The clearer it became that Dr. Zhang was involved in something far more sinister than simply helping people like her. What is this? Jane whispered, her voice trembling as she scanned through a particular folder labeled Project Elysium. It sounds like some kind of military program. Era's expression darkened. That's exactly what it appears to be, she said grimly. Dr. Zhang has been using these implants not just for treating mental health issues, but also as a means to create emotionally detached, easily controllable soldiers and operatives. Jane felt the blood drain from her face as the implications hit home. She wasn't just fighting against an unethical psychiatrist. She was facing down a potential government-sponsored conspiracy that threatened humanity's very soul. We need to get this evidence out there, Era said urgently, her eyes locked on Jane's. We can't let Dr. Zhang and whoever else is involved continue using people like us as pawns. Without another word, they began transferring files and data onto a portable storage device, each passing second bringing them closer to exposing the truth behind Project Elysium. As they worked, Jane couldn't shake off the feeling that their actions had already been detected. That Dr. Zhang was closing in on them, determined to silence anyone who threatened his sinister plans. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the warehouse, a cacophony of sirens and flashing lights signaling an imminent lockdown. We have to go, Era said firmly as she grabbed Jane's arm. Now. Without hesitation, they raced back through the maze of crates, their footsteps pounding out a desperate rhythm on the metal floor. As they burst through the door into the rain-soaked night, Jane could only pray that they'd managed to secure enough evidence to take down Dr. Zhang and his collaborators, and that they had escaped in time to evade capture. The fight was far from over. It had merely begun in earnest, and as she looked up at the dark sky, Jane knew that no matter what lay ahead, she would stand firm against those who sought to erase humanity's emotional essence, because that was the true cost of her freedom. Raindrops pelted Jane's face as she ran alongside Era, their footsteps splashing in the puddles, littering the deserted alleyway. The cold air stung her eyes, making them water, but she ignored it, too focused on escaping the warehouse and its sinister occupant. "How much do we have?" Jane yelled over the din of rain and sirens as they turned a corner onto the main street. Era pulled out her phone, her hand shaking slightly. "Almost everything," she replied breathlessly. "We got most of the files and databases before." A deafening boom cut through the night air, followed by the shattering of glass and splintering wood. Jane's heart skipped a beat as she watched, frozen in horror, as the warehouse behind them erupted into flames. "We have to get out of sight," Era shouted, grabbing Jane's hand and pulling her toward an alleyway between two dilapidated buildings. They stumbled through the narrow passage, their bodies slamming against the damp brick walls as they sought cover from whatever chaos had just been unleashed. Panting and disheveled, Jane pressed herself against the wall, staring out at the burning warehouse. Flames shot high into the night sky, illuminating the darkened streets with an eerie glow that cast long shadows across the rain-soaked pavement. The sirens were growing louder now, the distant wail of emergency vehicles converging on the scene. "This is bad," Jane whispered, her mind racing with the implications of what they had just witnessed. Dr. Zhang must have called in the fire department as a diversion to cover his escape. She turned to Era, whose eyes were wide with fear and determination. "We need to get off the streets now." Era nodded, wiping the rain from her face with the back of her hand. "My car's parked around the corner," she said, already moving toward the exit of their makeshift hideout. Jane followed closely behind, her senses on high alert as they navigated through the dimly lit alleyway. The air was thick with smoke and fear, hanging heavy over the city like a dark cloud. Implant had tried to do. No, not now. Not when she'd finally broken free from its hold. Jane's grip tightened on Era's arm as they emerged onto the main street, the rain-soaked vehicles glinting in the moonlight like a graveyard of steel and glass. They made their way toward the curb where Era's car was parked, moving with purpose and urgency. As she reached for the door handle, Jane hesitated, her hand hovering over it like a question mark etched into the night air. She glanced back at the burning warehouse, its skeletal frame reaching toward the heavens as if in defiance of their escape, and felt an overwhelming sense of loss and anger. Dr. Zhang had taken so much from her, the memories that made her who she was, the capacity to love and lose, but he would never take away her fight. With renewed determination, Jane opened the car door, slid into the passenger seat, and slammed it shut behind her. Era started the engine, peeling out of the parking spot with a screech of tires that sent shivers down Jane's spine. As they sped through the deserted streets, weaving in and out of traffic like fugitives on the run, Jane knew she had only one goal in mind: to expose Dr. Zhang's crimes and reclaim her life, no matter what lay ahead. The journey was far from over. It was just beginning, dark, twisted, and unyielding. But for the first time since that fateful day when she'd been handed a neural implant with promises of solace and relief, Jane felt alive, a raging firestorm of emotions coursing through her veins like liquid courage. She had faced her demons, shattered the chains of control, and emerged on the other side, battered but unbowed. And now, as the city's neon lights blurred together in a kaleidoscope of color and chaos around them, she knew that nothing, not even Dr. Zhang himself, could extinguish the flame within her soul. She had found her voice, her strength, and her reason for fighting back against an increasingly cold and heartless world. Jane was ready to face whatever lay ahead, hell or high water, with a determination forged in the crucible of her own resilience. and as they drove into the unknown, she knew that she would never be silenced again. Not by Dr. Jiang, not by the government, and certainly not by the neural implant's false promises of peace. The war was far from over. Jane had merely found her footing on the battlefield, and with every mile driven through the rain-soaked night, she could feel her spirit rising like a phoenix from the ashes, the scars still visible, but the fire within burning brighter than ever before. Jane's eyes met Era's in the rearview mirror as the car sped through the rainy night, leaving the burning warehouse and its secrets behind them. The tension that had gripped her since their escape finally began to ease, replaced by a growing sense of hope and possibility. "You did it," Era said quietly, breaking the silence that had filled the car for miles. "You took control back, Jane. You broke free from Dr. Jiang's hold." Jane nodded slowly, still trying to process the enormity of what she'd accomplished. "I thought I was lost forever," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I found my way out, and it feels alive, real." Era smiled, reaching back to squeeze Jane's hand reassuringly. "That's what makes you so powerful now, your authenticity. You've been through hell and come out the other side unbroken." As they drove on, Jane felt a weight lifting from her shoulders with every mile. The nightmare of Dr. Jiang's manipulation was behind her. She had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, but there were still questions that needed answers. "Era," she began hesitantly, "what do you know about my implant? How did it end up being used for something so sinister?" Era sighed heavily, her expression turning somber. "I can't pretend to understand everything about Dr. Jiang's research or your implant specifically, but I do know that he was working on a project funded by some of the most powerful corporations in the world. They wanted soldiers emotionally detached and compliant, who could be used for their own ends." Jane felt a chill run down her spine as the implications sank in. "And they chose me," she whispered, disgust and outrage rising within her. Era's voice was grim. "But you fought back, Jane. You refused to be just another pawn in their game. And now, because of your courage, others might not have to suffer what you did." Jane turned back to face the window, watching as the cityscape whizzed by a blur of steel and glass, neon lights and shadowy alleys. She knew that her journey was far from over. There were still those who had orchestrated this atrocity. She would need to expose them for what they truly were. But for now, as Era's hand rested in hers and the rain pattered against the windshield, Jane allowed herself a moment of peace. She had faced the abyss and emerged stronger than ever before, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with nothing but her own resolute spirit. After some time, as the first hints of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Era spoke again. "We should find somewhere safe to rest for a while," she said gently. "You've been through enough in the past few days." Jane nodded, feeling exhaustion finally begin to claim her. She had pushed herself to the limit, and now it was time to recharge before taking on the next phase of her quest. As they pulled into an abandoned parking lot on the outskirts of the city, Jane glanced back at Era. "I'll never stop fighting," she vowed, "no matter what comes our way." Era smiled, a fierce glint in her eye. Together they climbed out into the rainy dawn, ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed with truth, courage, and an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of adversity. The abandoned parking lot seemed eerily quiet as Jane and Era stepped out into the early morning rain. A few flickering streetlights cast dim shadows across the cracked asphalt, but otherwise it was a desolate, empty space, perfect for their purposes. "I'll start setting up the comms gear," Era said, already heading towards the car's trunk. "You rest for a bit." Jane nodded gratefully and slumped against the damp metal of the driver's door. She felt drained, both physically and emotionally. The past few days had taken an immense toll on her, losing control to Dr. Jiang, infiltrating his facility, confronting him, and now she was facing the aftermath. After a short while, Era returned with a large backpack slung over one shoulder. "Everything's set up," she said, dropping down beside Jane. "We can reach out to our allies and start organizing resistance efforts." Jane straightened up, rubbing her eyes wearily. "And what about Dr. Jiang? He'll be furious when he finds out his implants are being disabled by the hour." Era cracked a small smile. And with this evidence, our allies will rally around us in no time. Jane felt a surge of determination course through her veins as she listened to Era's confident words. The woman was right. They did have the upper hand now, and it wasn't just about taking down Dr. Jang, it was about exposing the entire corrupt network behind him. "All right," Jane said, standing up and brushing off her jeans. As they settled in to coordinate their efforts, Jane couldn't help but think back on everything that had brought them here. The neural implant that had nearly destroyed her life, the support group that had shown her the truth about Dr. Zhang, Era herself, who had become a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. She glanced over at her new ally and friend, noticing the way the early morning light danced across her face. There was something more Jane wanted to ask her, now something she had been hesitant to bring up before, fearing it might jeopardize their fragile alliance. But in this moment, as they stood together united against a common enemy, she felt emboldened. "Era," Jane said softly, turning towards her. "There's something I've been wanting to know." "What is it?" Era turned to face her, eyebrows raised inquiringly. Jane took a deep breath before speaking the question that had been on the tip of her tongue since their initial meeting, the one she feared might shatter Era's trust in her. "Who are you, really?" she asked hesitantly. Era's eyes flashed with surprise for a brief moment, and then she burst out laughing. It was a sound Jane hadn't heard before, a rich, full-throated laugh that seemed to shake off the shadows that had dogged their every step. "My dear, you want to know my backstory?" Era chuckled. "I am an agent of change, that's all I'll say for now." She reached out and squeezed Jane's hand reassuringly. "But let me tell you this, I'm on your side, through and through." Jane felt a warmth spread through her chest as she returned the squeeze. In that moment, none of the other questions mattered, not who Era really was, not what lay ahead, but only the truth that stood between them, their shared commitment to justice. "So," Jane said with renewed resolve, "tell me more about these allies we're going to mobilize." Era grinned, her eyes sparkling with a fierce light. "Oh, I have a few tricks up my sleeve." And with that, they dove headfirst into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with truth, courage, and an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of adversity. Together, they set out to reclaim the future one life at a time. And as the sun slowly rose over the city skyline, casting its first rays upon the desolate parking lot where it all began, Jane knew that this was only the beginning, the start of a long, arduous journey towards healing and hope for herself and countless others like her. As she looked out into the rain-soaked streets, now illuminated by the soft glow of dawn, Jane felt her heart swell with determination. She had emerged from the darkness, stronger than ever before, and nothing could stop her now.